and researcher in space information systems. Thank you very much, Barbara. Good afternoon. Thanks for sharing this session. This is an enormous challenge for me because I'm not representing us a university only or even a university network, because we have a network of universities, but I will also be talking on behalf of each and all the organizations that were part of the Triangular Cooperation project co-financed in 2024 by the European Union, where we worked specifically on digital transformation in indigenous communities of Argentina, Ecuador, and Panama. For us, this geospatial look that my co-panelists mentioned, it's essential because maps are the language that allow us to interpret the whole information of our territory at different levels of the indigenous population. So we implemented a quality information and a transforming process with technology as one more element to prop up their local economies. We know that climate change is impacting the world and was said repeatedly. Indigenous communities are those that suffer this climate change because all of their activities are linked to their lands. That's why in this initiative, which is a triangular cooperation initiative, which is wider, triangular cooperation is a horizontal process involving alliances with an approach to strengthen knowledge through experience, the exchange of experience. In 2024, we financed one of digital transformation, including 148 million euros financed by the EU. So we established an alliance through two academic universities, the Colombian University, IDEAN in Colombia, that led the project, the Salzburg University, a university that has a department called GIZ, and that promotes training in spatial knowledge from Salzburg and develops its capabilities, its teaching capabilities in programs devoted to geographic information network system through UNICEF's network in South America. We also had the collaboration of the University of San Francisco of Quito, who had an auxiliary role as a collaborator of the initiative, and the communities of the different countries. In the case of Panama, they were represented by AMBIP, the Panama Association of Indigenous Municipalities. Through AMBIP, we linked all municipals with their municipal heads, and also traditional units that with whose members were trained to have a far more comprehensive territorial view. In Argentina, we work with a foundation called Fundación Gran Chaco Foundation, which works specifically. It works a lot with women communities, and we included a community called Vaca Perdida, represented by peasant women who have a family production economy with weaving products. They prepare the wool and by selling their craft. And in Ecuador, we work with the Icofan community, one of the nations involving different communities, including Chachi, Siona, Icofan, Pichua, and others. To complete the structure, requested the funding. We also included the private sector, the company Enrich Panama that leads the geotechnologies market, software for GIS at a global level, which has been active for 10 years already in Panama. And through that cooperation, we linked public entities, NGOs, private sector companies, and academic entities. Now, to emphasize what the meaning of a triangular cooperation, this horizontal approach requires, as we see, that all of these partnerships integrate all sectors. In the case of the EU, the program was called Adelante 2024, Go Ahead 2024, but from 2021 to 2024, more than 47 initiatives were involved with more than 200 entities and some 750,000 euros. The specific project was structured in 3 macro stages distributed over 6 months. The first, participatory diagnosis. In all cases, we worked with a hybrid model, bringing people from different communities in Panama, which were concentrated in the city precisely because of connectivity issues and to have a greater interaction. But in all cases, we also connected the Ecuadorian and Argentine communities that were meeting in common spaces. Diagnosis was conducted using Smart City Latam, which has an agile process which works through a platform in axes and factors linked to indicators precisely, in this case linked to the SDGs. The primary objectives were SDG 4, quality education, SDG 9, in infrastructure, SDG 10, reduction of inequalities, and SG 17, alliances for objectives. And for this diagnosis, we worked in collaborating targets, and all the participators of workshops worked together in 25 people groups, and we saw how that wheel was being completed with colors and completing these indicators which were more easy to interpret. And the second stage, validation, we used technical reports developed by community which indicated not only the potential coming from the diagnosis, but also guidelines about possible project, because one of the fundamental issues with financing is that oftentimes there are some pillars that are available for certain topics, but the communities are still not sufficiently technically prepared to share these guidelines. So generating these diagnoses with work lines will allow us to leave at the end of the project some guidelines or actions for viable projects which are much more easy to adapt when offering a specific funding. Training was a full week of 8-hour days with the same approach. We joined physically the people, but this time the Salzburg University sent its teachers, and the curricula was worked collaboratively in a very balanced way, not only between the Havana University that has an expertise in environmental management and sustainable development, but also the University of Salzburg, but also training from a private company to make sure that the utilization of the tools by the population could be effective. At the request of communities, their curriculum also include a course on drone management, because with other resources they are acquiring drones, but they don't use it to the maximum, or people don't know how to use them, or they don't know how to apply the drones for other types of programs. So we felt it was important to listen to them and to include in those trainings what the people really needed, the trainees really needed. The key was to have a specific product for each activity. For the diagnosis, the consultant delivered the reports, but in the validation workshop and with the learning of the spatial tools acquisition, especially web tools, we constructed this image, a web application that integrates the alphanumerical variables of the diagnosis from a traditional report and links this to maps. So for these indigenous communities, it was much simpler to see the behavior of those axes and indicators in a colored map where they could relate than doing simply this by reading a technical report. And of course, that tool is a collaborative tool that continues for those communities. The tools we use both in the project and in the courses continue to be available to the communities to work with them. And then the second specific product had to do with the development of these viable project portfolios broken down in the main themes that came as problems in each community. Each community worked until now in its own scenario: water pollution, mining, extractive activities, illegal economic activities in their territories, migration topics, and then we needed to define family interventions when it comes to family economies that depend on a single individual. And so how do we take in those risks? Who studies or does not study in the family, who can travel to get vocational training or not. So these things came from the workshop, and the product was to systematize the problems and prioritize projects. So we need to take a look at the priority projects, which are priority, which are viable, and how do they align, and how do we establish metrics to perform those projects and monitoring them over time. The third and last activity was that of a meeting and a closing seminar conducted in Ecuador, in Quito, where the host university was the San Francisco University of Quito, precisely because the ECOFAN nationality has been working for more than 20 years in technology. It is duly trained, and it's using spatial technology as a way to have political championship and advocacy. And so it was useful for us to go to Ecuador. More than 30 of us met there, and a 1-week workshop allowed us to complement the learning topics, which were difficult to manage in a hybrid manner. So we consolidated these topics, and we used laboratory systems that consolidated knowledge. And the most important thing is that we started to work in workshop, exchanging the experiences of different communities. That allowed us to work much better when it comes to gender policies. And this is a very significant photo for me. Here we have the reference people from the Gran Chaco Foundation, Vaca Perdida Foundation, Bernabela, the single mayor of indigenous groups in Panama, then a CEO from Panama, a female leader of the ECOFAN community, which talked about women-led economics based on craftsmanship work, and I supported the entire project. So this plan of action has to necessarily have a timeline of future commitments, but also we need to say what do we earn. There was a triangular financing project, 5 steps among 100 applicants. Has no sense if we cannot determine the future after the alliance. And what is that future? The possibility to sign commitments among parties. In the future, we don't necessarily need to be the 5 members altogether, but to see who can coordinate the interests, and the synergy workshop to share experiences propped up those talents. Now we are looking at the future of this partnership or of this alliance. This is a QR of a survey of indigenous talent we conducted a short time ago to expand the alliance. In Panama, the Association of Panama Indigenous Peoples called for a joint action to SVIC and the Inter-American Institute for the Research of Global Change. And we met to think what we could do, and we developed this map of indigenous talent that through a real-time survey gathers all the information of all those young people who are preparing themselves for a better future, that are deciding whether to stay at their village or to travel, get a master's degree, and then go back to their lands to contribute that knowledge. So we are developing this map of indigenous talent. We see here interesting things. For example, in this composition, this is a live table that has about 50 individuals. Most than half of them continue living in their regions. 1/3 are women. The percentage of economically active population coincides with the census of economically active population, 32 in the case of women and 36 in the case of men. And when we want to see where are the populations with their own entrepreneurial activities, they are all led by men. So we need to continue working for the future to include women. Finally, some conclusions. We talked about capabilities increased by geotechnologies, because an image speaks more than 1,000 words, but a map speaks more than 1,000 images. We started with geography information as a clear value added. Vulnerability and equity require a multi-sectoral commitment to put an end to them from a territorial point of view. Triangular cooperation allows each part to have an essential role for the success of initiatives. So we also had the Vice Minister of Indigenous Affairs in Panama, and we discovered other universities such as the Autonomous University of Indigenous Affairs, which we discovered when implementing the project. And now we have participatory platform for intercommunal data. A project in Darien between Colombia and Panama, and a project of regenerative agriculture. I end up by thanking this alliance and GIZ and all those who made possible the alliance. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Had 3 different perspectives. The first one was an institutional perspective from Colombia. All the participatory support that included a prior consent, a national prior consent with indigenous communities. The second one, the perspective from FAO, and featuring all the compilation of lessons learned and case study from different countries in LAC. And third, we had Barbara with academic perspective with an alliance with private companies launching a platform that a collaborative platform for using geospatial data analysis for strengthening territorial governance of indigenous communities. Thank you so much to the three of them. So now the second part. So let's go for the applause. So now the second part, we will focus on the perspectives, directly from the communities, from some of the leaders of the communities. It will be a very interesting dialogue that will be led by Diana Pizarro, who is our global expert on indigenous peoples. So, Diana, please. Los llamas.